Alrighty, welcome to the stream, everybody. It's been 1 week since we last spoke, or 1 week off, I should say. So, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We were not available last week because there was an important conference I had to attend on the topic of liberty. So, I just couldn't be here, but we're here now. And we are also going to have to go without me having a webcam for the time being because I'm going to just tell you the truth. My job has got me in a situation where not only have I had to shave my face, but I'm working with irritants and I am just a big old swollen mess. So I don't want to expose you guys to that. And I also just don't want to deal with the embarrassment. So what we're going to do instead is I've got a couple of really good text questions, actually. But we also have some callers lined up right out of the gate. So we'll get into one text question, and then we'll probably just get uh, right into calls. What do you think, Zulu?
Yep, sounds good to me.
All right. So here's a question from Dakota, and I've been waiting for this question for a long time. So I want to make sure that we get it right on the jump. The question is, how does a stateless Ancap society ensure that a polycentric style law remains peaceful and upholds the sovereignty of individuals in the face of potentially threatening hostile markets or foreign states owned corporate influence? I'm not sure. It made more sense when I read it out, but now that I'm in my head, but now that I'm reading it out loud, I think the run on sentence is getting me. I'll just read it verbatim. Um, so, how does a stateless ANCAP society ensure that polycentric style law remains peaceful and upholds the sovereignty of individuals in the face of potentially threatening hostile market or foreign state owned corporate influence without a final arbiter of justice and defender of the individual's freedom? I'll let you take a crack at that first.
Sure. So, it needs a final arbiter thing. I'm assuming, you know what they say about assumptions; they're always good. I'm assuming this is coming from Irandian of some description, because that's their big problem, it seems, with anarcho-capitalism. So I just want to make abundantly clear um, that I do not consider polycentrism to be a form of anarcho-capitalism. Polycentrism is David Friedman's theory, where it's all about how we'll have law and arbitration will all arise on the market, that there'll be producers of law. Um, I think this is a total stolen concept fallacy. Because how do you identify the market in the first place? Right. Okay. So let's say that laws can arise on the market. Okay. Well, what is the market? Well, if you ask a Rothbardian, they can very easily say, well, you're in the market if you're in the zone of non-aggressive interactions between men. Then you're in the market. It's not being hampered in any way with aggressive interference. We're still squarely in man economy and state, not yet in power and market, right? Um, so that's how the Rothbardian can answer that. It strikes me that there is no way that a Friedmanite could possibly answer this. How do you identify the market in the first place? Um, which is what is required for them to have their sense of polycentric laws arising on the market. Now, I suppose to just kind of indicate our sort of response to, well, how will let's remove the polycentric law term from the question. How will some sort of anarchist society ensure that people keep following what we believe is the objectively correct law? How will we ensure that there won't be this outside influence with foreign states, so on and so forth? Well, in the exact same way that the minarchist would ensure it, that is, if people want that to happen, then that's going to happen, right? I don't. How would an objectivist minarchy, Ayn Rand's utopia, how would she ensure that the state never enacts a bad law, that never starts violating people's rights? Well, I mean, there isn't a magic spell that she can wave her wand and make sure that never happens. It'll only happen if the society is constituted of people who want that to happen. Right? That's the way around it goes. The society doesn't determine what the people do, and the people in the society, from them you arise these larger social structures. So the social structures are entirely dependent on the opinions of the people within that system.
Sure. Now, you might be interested to know that this individual, I actually know for a fact that they're not an objectivist of any stripe. They're actually what I would call, I'm sure they might object to this, but I would say that they're sort of just a run of the mill social democrat.
I just assumed because they started talking about like we need like a final arbiter, and I suppose that's people other than objectivists believe that. That's just whenever I hear that, my alarm bells start going off that I'm talking to a Randian.
Something that I find interesting about the framing of that kind of question that I think always kind of surprises me, and I have to remember that it wasn't obvious to me until I was already operating in this framework and was really familiar with the literature. That to me, when I hear how does a stateless society ensure X, Y, or Z, to me, well, ANCAPs, just to be clear, we're not really advocating for statelessness as the only parameter that's important to us, right? Because one can imagine a stateless society of cannibal barbarians, which would be very much not what we're aiming at, right? Statelessness, it seems, is more of a expected result from a more important foundational ethical observance, which would be property rights. And so, an anarcho-capitalist society, or just a generic stateless society that's elevated above the cannibal barbarians. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a ANCAP society. So how can a group of people who are committed to not committing aggression solve this problem? Is the framing that I always think of this in. And it seems so much less of a difficult question in that framing. Because I think that the framing that the let me sort of go out on a limb here and say the less familiar status point of view is sort of begging the question. I'm using that a little bit inappropriately here, but they're sort of building in the assumption that there need to be some sort of final and institutionalized authority. But what we're describing is a group of people who are committed to not committing aggression. And in order to have a understanding of aggression, they need to have a theory of property rights that can create the boundaries for it gives them a framework to perceive the boundaries. I don't want to say create because then it sort of sounds like I'm appealing to that institutionalized authority again. So I got to be really clear about that. But yeah, so we got all these people. They're committed to non-aggression. That means they must have a theory of property rights. Can they solve that problem? And it seems so, I don't want to say intuitive, but it doesn't seem to require a leap of faith to imagine that a group of people who are committed to not committing aggression would be entirely capable. And as Zulu, I've heard you say this many times yourself, because of the fact that they are not hindered by inefficient economic allocation, the kinds of things that come from a state, they'd be even more effective than maybe some of their statist competitors when it comes to self-defense. I don't know. I suppose that that's everything I want to say on it. Is just that reframing it so that we are a little bit more clear about what we're talking about seems to do a lot of the work at dissolving or evaporating what causes so many people to struggle with the question. And I don't know, Zulu, any last words on that question before we move on to our first caller?
Yeah, no, I mean that's absolutely correct. That yeah, we're really anarchism isn't the fundamental that is opposition to the state isn't the fundamental thing. Just as being opposed to murder or rape, well, that's not fundamental in our belief system. It comes from these more fundamental principles like the non-aggression principle, and then the question is, well, how do you actually go about existentially realizing the non-aggression principle? How do you go about making sure that that's something that people follow, and what does that look like in reality? And as it turns out, what it looks like is you don't have a government, or at least you don't have a state, I should say.
Excellent. Well, our first caller is on the line with us, but they have asked for just a few moments before we go into the call. So I think we should instead just take another text question in the meantime. Here's an
Cool.
interesting one.
I did
Oh,
just
sorry.
realize I forgot to fill up my water before the start. So whilst you start that, I'm just going to quickly nip down and fill up my water. So that's all right.
Sure thing. Absolutely. All right. So in the meantime, we've got a question, a series of 3 questions from Mossy. And the 3 questions are: why should anyone be an Ancap? Doesn't Ancap lead to feudalism? And can free markets truly remain free? Wouldn't companies and corporations form monopolies? I think that first question deserves a lot of attention in and of itself. I think we could talk about that all day long and only skim the surface. So I'm going to circle back around to that once we have Zulu, and I think that the two perspectives together will give a little bit more of a comprehensive answer on that. In the meantime, this is a really common one, which is the question: wouldn't it lead to feudalism? Doesn't the free market direct us towards feudalism? Well, we have to consider a couple of different aspects of what's being discussed here. What's feudalism constitute? What's free market? And I can so totally see, if we play the devil's advocate, what is it that makes people believe in this association with the free market, apparently having a pipeline directly to feudalism? Well, if we know that hierarchies are going to form naturally in the scope of a free market, that's just a natural consequence, of course, of some people being better at producing and satisfying the needs of consumers than others are, then what's going to happen is that there's going to be a growing disparity between the best producers or the best suppliers and the worst. Naturally, if you have a particularly effective industry and that involves owning the land that your factory is built on, you can conceivably expect that that will expand over time in proportion to your success as an entrepreneur. And so we can see why the skeptic starts to believe that there is something feudal like happening here. And Zulu, we're just answering the question quickly: doesn't the free market lead to feudalism? And so I was just explaining why I can understand and sympathize with people who come to that conclusion at a sort of topical, they're looking at something at a very surface level way, and they kind of come to that conclusion. But let's think about, with regard to feudalism, some of the things that are a bit characteristic of feudalism that aren't quite going to be expected outcomes in a truly free society. One of the things about feudalism that I think we should take really careful note of here is that you can own other people. You can indenture them into servitude that they can never escape. And I think that that's an obviously completely irreconcilable difference. And anarcho-capitalists with a first comer based non-aggression theory of property, this is just not something that can ever be, how do they say? This is a circle that can never be squared. And this is, I think, where the significance of that comparison starts to break down, because it's in these sort of attributes that make feudalism seem undesirable, where we start to discover that the analogy doesn't really work. So, sure, you'll have some people with many employees, like a landed estate in feudalism, uh, people who are, workers their whole lives because they're not as effective entrepreneurs, or they just don't have the opportunities or what have you. But these things I don't think are obviously objectionable in any inherent way. On the other hand, what we see is that the elements of feudalism where we expect to actually have something to object to, there's no reason to think that those are going to emerge on a free market. So there's my 2 cents. Zulu, you want to take it from there?
Sure. I do want to bring in some of the historical context of where feudalism slots in. Because, yes, indeed, it did have a lot of things we would dispute. It was still fundamentally a status system, but it was actually going much more in the direction of what we're after than what came before. Like, you'll see these maps, like, posted online sometimes, of the number of, they put like a little red dot on every castle in Europe. Now, this means that power is a lot more decentralized than it would be under some total absolutist monarchy, or under some, like, the Roman Empire, something like that. You don't really get castles in the Roman period. So what feudalism really is taking some of those powers which were previously just for the sovereign, and it splits them out over more and more people, decentralizes them. Because now, if you've got castles all over the place, each of these nobles, they each have their own, bloody castle, and well, you can't just order them to do arbitrary things because they could just say, "Nah, I'm not going to do that actually, and we're going to have a different king installed because we don't like you any longer." Well, yeah, you're going to have to besiege a bunch of castles now. That's not so simple as just, oh, well, I'm just a military dictator and I just control everything. You can't just have your family costed away and protected from me. Um, but yes, indeed, feudalism, it's still not what we're after, because feudalism, namely, because it didn't have proper property norms. So if you were some feudal lord, I would have my castle somewhere. I would be understood to be the owner of pretty much everything in the fief. Some of the really valuable stuff, the king would be considered the owner, and if I'm the lord, I would just get maybe like a license to be doing the mining of the gold for him or what have you. Um, but yeah, so that's where the concept of poaching comes from. Actually, it was considered poaching if I was to go out and hunt something in some lord's fiefdom, because it was considered that, well, the lord already owns that deer or that fox or what have you that I kill. So this is improper homesteading norms. If you had that with proper homesteading norms, well, then you're basically in a free market there, right? That it wouldn't be a problematic at all if it was just purely, hey, I actually own this land that I've walled off here, and you can come and work on this land if you want, and you've got to give me you got to pay me this amount of money. If you don't like this deal, you don't like the protection of being you know being able to come into my castle in case some like raiders come along or what have you, and you can go off into the wilderness, found your own stuff, go work the land in the middle of nowhere if you want. If you had proper homesteading norms, then it really wouldn't be objectionable at all to us. So I think it's worthwhile keeping that in mind, because feudalism is often just taken as like, oh my god, that's just the worst possible thing. Actually, no, it is bad, specifically in the ways that it's not lining up with our understanding of ethics. It's specifically in those ways in which you get the bad stuff happening.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect spot for us to leave it, because we're going to move on to. Now, I do want to say before I move on, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, we do have a caller who wants to specifically come in and contend that you and I were wrong about the anarcho capitalist feudal connection. But we have another caller we have to get to first while they make their way through the pipeline, the call screener pipeline. So, this person's going to come in and argue with us a little bit about the transition to Ancapistan. Miguel, welcome to the call. You are calling back. This is not your first time. If you want, you can just go ahead and phrase your question, and we'll answer it once you're ready.
Hello, is my mic clear?
Yep.
All right. So I was having this conversation today. Well, actually, saw it in the server, your Discord server, in which the transition of the to the anarcho-capitalist society was being discussed, and there was also the issue. So I have two issues on this matter. First of all, some people said that the anarcho-capitalists could build their own economic relations within their own spaces, and if actually essentially this can be led into an international level into which we don't need to interact with state intermediated economies. And the second part of this matter, I believe they're both very interconnected, was arguing that the state can be used against itself to disappear and effectively allow for an anarcho-capitalist society. My first counterpoint for the first issue was to mention the fact that the material resources that we use today are heavily interconnected from countries who are far away as millions of kilometers from the living spaces we have. And the second issue for the state was that it's to analyze the relation of the state in of itself. I think it's contradictory because the law that is put in place is meant to ensure the state's existence. So you would have to use some kind of revolutionary means.
All right. Just before I move on here, are you able to see the? I think you can. You can see what I've got up on the screen there, right?
Oh,
Where I'm okay. So if I'm writing anything down, if I'm taking notes here about the call, and you think that I'm getting something wrong, please let us know. Zulu, do you want to
okay.
jump in at this first?
I just wanted to precise, like for the material resources, I said that like it requires the like it requires at least for a first anarcho-capitalist society to, let's say, emerge in New Jersey, the rest of the world hasn't adapted to it immediately, so it will need some kind of its own kind of agency to interact with the states, basically, and that would replicate the state in of itself, I think. But yeah, you feel free to add it or not.
Zulu, I hope I've laid everything that Miguel has said out clearly. I'm going to let you take the first crack at it while I just take a moment to make sure that everything is organized here on the screen.
Sure. So I think primarily it's worth noting that, these ideas like, the counter economics claims, which sounds like what you're getting at with the first one, or we can use the state against itself. These sorts of strategic concerns are actually like entirely secondary. What doesn't matter urgently are the specific individual steps that will lead us towards anarcho-capitalism. We don't need to centrally plan our strategy of how to get there. What is most fundamental is if you get the philosophy of the day, that is the philosophy which is accepted by some critical mass of people. If that philosophy implies and embraces anarcho-capitalism, well then we simply are just going to get an anarcho-capitalist society, and there's nothing that anybody on Earth could do to stop that from happening. Now, we don't have to go, and then there would be this group of people, and they need to do these specific things, and this group of people, they need to do these specific things. That we don't have to go into that level. I don't think it's possible to go into that level. Certainly, it's possible for people to just engage in a free market way outside of the state. Yeah, that can happen. Really, the fundamental point is strategies, things like that happening. They're going to happen on their own without us getting involved and telling people you got to do this, that, and the other thing. That's going to happen if the philosophy of the day implies anarcho-capitalism. That it's all completely downstream of the more fundamental goal, which is going out there and reaching the remnant, gathering them up and making sure that they're preaching the anarcho-capitalist principles. People just are going to start doing these sorts of things. It's spontaneous order as against
Could I ask?
central planning.
Sorry, could I ask about more about the philosophy of the day? I feel like I just wanted to know, do you think there's a heavy disconnect between the economic situation, or at least how the economy of a country works with the dominant ideologies or whatever? Do you think that there is some kind of marketplace of ideas that could exist independently of the current state of economy?
So my claim is that the economic structures you end up with, they all depend upon what the philosophy of the day is. The philosophy of the day tells you exactly what sort of society you should expect, and this has always been the case. As the philosophy of the day became primed for some sort of Hegelian socialism in the East, sure enough, those are the exact sorts of societies you get rising up. As the philosophy of the day was primed for some sort of more freedom-oriented society in the lead up to when America was being formed, that's the exact sort of society you end up with. So it's not that the economic structures you have are causing the philosophy of the day. It's completely the other way around. Just as wet roads don't cause rain, the rain causes the wet roads.
I mean, I have to ask if you think that the political structure, like you said, you gave the king as an example who has his own ideas. Do you not think that there are nonetheless similar traits? I mean, I'd have to ask, for example, feudalism. As much as we like to use the term, it's mostly an umbrella to take into account the different varying variances that we could have found in France historically, in England, and Germany. Just to put the three examples as the best.
I'm not like what is sort
Okay,
of the
so
question?
I'm trying to say that like that essentially. Wait, sorry. Just give me a second. Just to. Okay, so I was asking about the fact that the dominant ideas of individuals, I don't think they determine the configuration of society, because as much as different kings from different times had their own ideas and tried to implement it, there are still recurring patterns into which they are mostly economical. And I would have to simply talk about the Lord Serf examples. They still existed despite having different kings. They're having different ideas. So I do think that, like, in some sense, there are recurring patterns, and it's not rather the individuals that define a new kind of society, but rather the reoccurring patterns which are mostly occurring in the production of things that maintain the society.
So that different kings can have different, pardon me, opinions on certain matters. That isn't actually what I'm referring to when I'm referring to the philosophy of the day. It's not the philosophy of the king or the sovereign or what have you. It's the philosophy which is being broadly accepted by the population. That's what the philosophy of the day is. And, you know, in the Middle Ages, these different kings, they may have had different ideas on certain things, but that they only are king because the philosophy of the day allows them to be king. If, like, I would want to know, like, a counterexample of a society where pretty much everybody believes in a certain philosophy that is completely at odds with the actual political structures you see in that society, and where those political structures aren't immediately torn down. Like I can't think of a single counterexample like that.
Okay. Okay, so I'll get on a higher level of abstraction here. Sorry, I'm just trying to give the most context here, but I believe that we have like different approaches to understanding history. Where do you believe fundamentally the so if I understand this correctly, you believe that there's somehow a higher I don't know, how the hell do individuals get their ideas?
So most individuals aren't actually thinking about philosophy much at all. So they just end up getting their philosophy by osmosis. Now, where does the philosophy originate from? Well, it originates from the philosophers. Whatever the philosophers are saying, that ends up propagating out into society. So that's why I'm always saying, if we just win on the philosophy front, and if our arguments are just winning out, then everything else is downstream. It just all propagates out for us, and we don't have to go around making sure that Kyle from Texas is really understanding the intricacies of anarcho-capitalism. he's not going to think about philosophy, but he still does have a philosophy. Where does he get his philosophy from? Through osmosis, right? If we just provide that philosophy, then it happens.
I mean, I have to ask, like I want to get the quote right, but like victors always, they're the ones who write history, right? So you would have to like, in some sense, downplay the importance of military economic interventions into how people form their societies. No?
Yeah, indeed I do. Explicitly so. Now, military victories and stuff like that, they can tell you, they are important in history. Don't get me wrong. Like they can tell you the specific society which arises here. Is Russia going to be ruled by Marxist Leninists or some other sect of communist or Hegelian socialists? Is ran by the Marxist Leninists for that time period, because Lenin had a very sharp strategic mind, and he was able to win out over the other factions and take control. So certainly it does have an effect, and also certain different policies they can themselves influence the philosophy of the day in some area. If you've got one, some, like, let's say Ireland, right, and let's say you're an English monarch, and you want to solidify your rule over Ireland, well, then you can do something like transplanting a bunch of your people into Ireland, and that's going to alter the philosophy of the day within Ireland to be more advantageous towards you. So they do have an impact, but only insofar as they are changing the philosophy of the day. The philosophy of the day is still the fundamental point here.
Okay. I had another intervention on this, and it was mostly on. I think there's some kind of external parameter that allows for certain societies to take shape, and I say this because there are human societies who are extremely disconnected from one another, but we still find some kind of societies from a specific epoch, like for example matrilinear societies or patriarchal societies, depending on actually the level of advanced labor. I mean, I'd have to like quote, for example, Morgan's Ancient Society. As much as it is slightly outdated, it still very much showed how labor is effectively a determinant on the degree of quality in a society.
So I think you're doing wet roads causing rain again. How do you get super advanced capital structures? How do you get these things? Well, you had to have the right philosophy of the day in place first, and then people can start thinking, applying their mind to reality, and then
No, I mean,
that's how you get that sort of society. Like if we go right now, if we were to take a plane to India, take a boat out to North Sentinel Island, we would find that the North Sentinelese, in fact, it's not like a game of Civilization. They haven't just been around for enough years that now they have the same sort of society as us. No, they would have a very, very different sort of society, because they're tribal, right? They still hold on to those sort of Stone Age beliefs.
yeah, but like you said, they're tribal. How come, like since the inception of man, you would say like we were not originally quote tribal, but then we developed to become tribal, and that kind of social relation can be found in different parts of Africa, Asia, or hell, even Europe. Sorry, I can't fucking spell it, but yeah, there's recurring. Something is not right to say that like there's the philosophers who determine which kind of society will be happening, because there are varying environmental, at least there are varying resources, at least to find some kind of abstract notion of what kind of society I want. there's some kind of reflection, at least in the environment they're living in.
So can you give me like actual specifics, like oh, this society came about at this time because of their material conditions or what have you, completely at odds with what the philosophy of the day was, or even showing how the philosophy of the day is a reflection of material conditions or what have. Like I want like specifics here. Like I could give you specifics on my end. I gave you the ones about Russia. Why some manner of Hegelian collectivism was bound to take over there. Like I want to know like specifics of like, well, no, at this point in time, this society arose because of their material conditions, and then the material conditions implied these next material conditions, which gave rise to the next type of society. Like, can I get like specifics on that?
Okay. Sorry. Give me a second. All right. Let me think. It's not so much that I believe that it's merely material conditions to. Well, in a sense, there is some kind of like determinism. I wouldn't say like super hard determinism into how things work, but yeah, I do think there's some degree of determinism into how the production leads to certain social certain particular social relations. Um, I have to give, for example, the. I mean, can I quote you a quote from Engel's Origin of the Family, the State, and Private Property, or is it?
No, I suppose it
I'd rather
depends on how
just.
long the quote is.
It's
Like
not that.
all I really want is I just want like
Okay.
some particular examples, like some concretes where it's like, see, look,
Okay.
the material conditions were this at this time, and then that begat this sort of society, and then that changed the material conditions in some way, which begat the next type of society. Like, I just want really concrete, specific examples of that happening.
Okay. Give me a second. Because I didn't highlight on my laptop, so I have to find the thing again. But I'm mostly thinking, for example, the invention of writing, actually. In a sense, it gave a more a higher degree of conscience. We were able to write laws. Yeah. I don't have like much to say because I don't want to like say something false. But two examples, like
So,
giving a higher, like giving the opportunity of writing laws as well. If you could write that.
so how is that in particular, this material condition, how is that causing a certain sort of society? Now, I'm not asking how does it cause a society where writing is possible, because obviously it gives a society where writing is possible. Like, I want to know how the invention of writing, we'd have to question why people were able to invent writing in the first place. That's a philosophical question, a question about what their philosophy says. If their philosophy said that man cannot know anything, well, then they're not going to invent writing, are they? And so, yeah, that lets you record things and perhaps spread ideas a lot better. But that's still playing on the philosophy of the day. I want to know how this invention of writing, how that caused a certain type of society.
Okay, so I mean, I think in Mesopotamia, for example, the the degree of labor got so intense that it was difficult to manage it into a single small space. It was you had to somehow track the produce the not the commodities. I mean, what was being produced essentially, and the fact that you also had to trade across outside of Mesopotamia and inside Mesopotamia means that there had to be some kind of uh, capacity to like be able to record like I don't know, the grain storage, the debts you had, who owns what, and yeah, how would you distribute it according to a city per city basis?
Right. Okay. So yeah, the that explains why being able to have a written word was very useful for the Mesopotamians. But that's not really my question. I'm not asking why was writing useful for Mesopotamians. I'm asking, can you show that some particular change in the material conditions, namely being able to write now, can you show that gave you some particular like political structure, and like invariably that it must give you that particular political structure?
Um, hmm. I don't really like. What do you want me to show as proof? Like multiple societies having the same the similarities because of writing?
So I can like indicate what I'm getting at here. So the philosophy of the early Christian days, well, that was very much we're all just puppeted by God in effect, where it just requires total submission. You can't go out there and actually know things for yourself. That was the philosophy of the early church, and then you got that type of society where it was all total and utter power in those above you, and you can't know shit on your own. So they didn't get any scientific developments or anything like that, and that's what we call the Dark Ages. Then Aristotle's writings, which are very this worldly, looking out and judging the world and integrating that into your mind, that was reintroduced thanks to Thomas Aquinas, and then that's how we get to the Enlightenment. And then from the Enlightenment, those Enlightenment ideas, they get carried, they go into England, and then they get carried over to the New World. Those Enlightenment ideas kind of just are able to survive in the New World, and that's how you get to the United States of America versus back in Europe. Those Enlightenment ideas started to go into skepticism, right? And then you've got total skepticism, so you can't know anything. What do we end up with? We end up with Immanuel Kant and Hegel, right? And then those ideas become prominent. And what does that lead to? It leads to Nazi Germany. It leads to the USSR. It leads to Maoist China. It leads to all those things happening, right? So I can account for all of these different sorts of societies, why that sort of society arose at that time, by reference to who the philosopher was who begat that society. Sometime earlier, Immanuel Kant was writing these things, and then you fast forward 100 or so years, and his ideas have been accepted, and then you see what a duty ethic society looks like. You end up seeing this existentially realized. That's what I'm wanting to get from you. I want you to go, okay, well, at this time there was this material condition, which necessarily gives us this sort of society, and at a different time it was this material condition which necessarily gives us this sort of. I want you to give me like your story of some period in history, why it's necessarily the case, why it is the material conditions which are giving us these things rather than the ideas and the people who make up that society. Why are the ideas of the people who make up the society in fact irrelevant on your view? Why is it the material conditions, not the ideas of the people who make it up?
Okay, so I don't disagree to an extent that people do make the conditions in which we live in, like the quote material conditions. I believe it's a bit of a deterrent of what was meant. Usually, it's the people producing the things that make a society. So in that sense, this is what I mean by material conditions. And for your example, I'm not trying to say that like this economic relation necessarily leads to some kind of this to some kind of law that would always be there. Like the political structures will be varying according to environmental uh, conditions. For example, you can't talk about like not having a lion in your garden if there's no lion if you live in, let's say, Antarctica, whatever. And as you said, like you were mentioning this entire like lineage of philosophers, and I do have to ask.
You still there?
Yeah, let's give him a second just in case he was. We all have that happen at some point in their lives. Somebody walks into the room while we're doing something of the utmost importance.
Sorry, sorry. I'm
All good.
back. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So I was asking. I'll have to leave after that. So yeah. I was going to say that, like, you mentioned Aristotle, for example, and you mentioned that he took from nature. Is that not like the first proof of like being inspired from the material conditions that create these philosophical ideas? And another point I would like to make was on the French Revolution. It's not that the Immanuel Kant or Hegel, whatever these liberal philosophers had, like Voltaire, had in mind that led for the revolution to happen. It's rather that there was growing discontentment with the monarchy at the time, and that there were serfs from that were escaping the the feudal relations they once had to go into the newer urbanized spaces, and they later became wage laborers or just the new aristocracy. And it's through these means that the aristocracy with the peasantry and everything and every like subordinated class came to lead a revolution. And it's not because Immanuel Kant wrote of this, not because Voltaire wrote of this. In fact, some of them were basically chastised from, exiled from their countries. They were not as known as we do. I mean, Hegel, pretty much, he was a superstar at the time. I'm not gonna deny that, but like, it's not because of that. Because you have to also take into account that they were not. They were mostly intellectual spaces. They were not looking to vulgarize their philosophy to the maximum. It's more of, you could only see that in certain philosophers like Epicurus or even Marx, even though like, yeah,
So
essentially
again, my thesis actually is able to completely account for that. I'm not saying that Immanuel Kant was going out there and having massive rallies with tens of thousands of people in attendance. Indeed, it was just costed off in these intellectual halls, which is exactly how philosophy is done and spreads. And then everybody else just kind of gets it through osmosis, unless they specifically start studying philosophy. And then they can deliberately choose what philosophy they end up with. Now, so yeah, you were saying,
you'd have to say,
you're saying like, well, in the French Revolution, people were becoming discontented with the aristocracy. Well, gee whiz, that sounds a whole lot like the philosophy today is changing, doesn't it? Like, I'm able to completely account for all of this stuff.
it's because they had the they were offering a much better kinds of relations compared to the feudal
Better,
lord.
according to what philosophy?
No, not according to what philosophy. They were just
That's how you do evaluation. Right, it's an ethical evaluation. This is a better relation than this one.
I mean, you're just supposing they had some kind of ethical framework in which it was not possible, because you have to remember most people were not educated enough to even have some kind of degree, some kind of like. No, you wait. Let me finish.
You still got philosophy.
It doesn't. No, there's no real kind of philosophy. Like people just act based on where they can secure their stuff and hopefully survive for the next day. That's the primary instinct people have. And
do you think the French Revolution could have happened in the 1400s?
Do I think it would have happened in the 1400s?
Yeah, or even earlier than the 1200s. Let's say we zoom back to a time where every single person in Europe believes in all the teachings of the Catholic Church. They believe that their king has been ordained by God via the Catholic Church to rule over some area. Do you think that they would just get, well, I'm not liking this arrangement. Let's do a revolution here. What words would they even use to justify such a revolution? People would be like, these people are heathens. They're trying to go against God's will. Like they would not. Nobody would stand for that. Do you think that it could have happened in like the early Middle Ages?
Not really, and it wouldn't happen anyways
Yeah.
today with anarcho-capitalism. If, let's say, you assume that it is the correct way, why is it not widely spread? There's some
Because it's not
kind
the
of
philosophy of the day.
there's no point of saying there's no philosopher of the day if you keep
I
like
didn't say there's
putting
no
the
philosophy
same.
of the day. I said anarcho-capitalism isn't implied by the philosophy of the day.
Okay, so you would have, what would be like the philosophy of the day in order for that to happen?
In order for that to happen, we'd have to have some philosophy of the day, some this worldly, Aristotelian sort of philosophy, where anarcho-capitalism is generally recognized to be the correct theory of law, at least among the philosophers, and then everybody else just kind of falls in line.
And this doesn't
That's what would
exist?
be required. No.
Okay, I mean, it's kind of odd, not gonna lie, because
Do you
the
think that
fact
is
that
the case right now, that most people agree with anarcho-capitalism?
no, I'm not saying that, because I think it's just a way of like trying to keep your idea correct when it's very much in some kind of I don't know how to qualify it, but what I'm trying to say is that you are applying everything, you are applying your idea to every part of history, but suddenly today it's not the case.
No, I'm still
Because
applying it today. I
no,
am still applying it today.
hold
I'm
on,
saying
let me
right
finish.
now,
Let me
it is the
finish.
case that the
Can you let me
philosophy of the day does
finish?
not imply anarcho-capitalism. And indeed, my theory would predict that we wouldn't have an anarcho-capitalist society right now. And would you look around you? We don't, in fact.
I mean, for at least 50 years, you're gonna explain to me that there's not one kind of philosophy that allows people to be aware of this?
Yes, I'm saying that indeed, for the past history of humanity, it has not been the case that the philosophy of the day implies anarcho-capitalism. Yes, I'm making that claim. Do you disagree? Do you think there was some period where the philosophy of the day implied anarcho-capitalism? Like, could you please point me to it?
Could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
So I'm saying yes, I am indeed making the claim that it is not the case that at any point in history that I'm aware of, that the philosophy of the day included anarcho-capitalism. I am making that claim. If you disagree with that claim, I want you to point me to the period in history which implied anarcho-capitalism.
None, because I don't think there's some kind of material condition that would lead for anarcho-capitalism to even exist. Because if we know that, like, to certain times, consciousness was to a certain degree, and no, like there was certain consciousness was essentially historically conditioned, then perhaps the reason why anarcho-capitalism is marginal is because capitalism in and of itself does require the existence of a state. In that case, the problem would not be that people merely lack the right ideas. I mean, there's a ton of YouTube channels that debate.
Right.
Your channel in of itself is
I'm aware
trying
that
to
that's
propel their
your
thing,
accounting for the fact
and
that we're not living in
and that,
anarcho-capitalism.
like, I mean,
I understand that that's how you account for it. I'm saying that on my theory does account for it, and you're saying like, no, you're doing some special pleading here. You're saying suddenly at one point the theory was this, and now suddenly you're not applying your theory here. I want you to tell me where I'm not applying my theory, where my theory
today
would predict a certain society to be anarcho-capitalism, and it turns out that it's not anarcho-capitalism, or vice versa.
is
I want you to tell me that
objectivism
on
not
my theory. What doesn't my theory account for?
is objectivism not anarcho-capitalist philosophy?
Yes, I think if objectivism became the philosophy of the day, we would indeed see anarcho-capitalist
Okay,
region.
is it a philosophy of anarcho-capitalism?
I don't know what that means.
Would you consider it a philosophy, part of anarcho-capitalism as a political ideology, whatever?
So I would consider anarcho-capitalism as the proper legal theory within objectivist philosophy, yes.
Okay, you said objectivist philosophy, right?
Well,
And
yes, that's
the reason why it's not dominant is not because people just haven't got the right ideas. It's just because it's
No,
it's
hold on,
margin.
no. Hold on. Do you think that the philosophy of the day right now is objectivism?
That's not what I said.
Okay, so what is my theory not accounting for here?
I'm saying that, like, if objectivism is a philosophy, and you're saying that we would transition into anarcho-capitalism if we had the right philosophy, and knowing that
It has to become
objectivism
the
is
philosophy of the day. It
is
can't just
if
be.
we,
It can't just be
let
Ayn
me
Rand
finish. Let
says
me
it,
finish.
and then suddenly it happens. It has to
you
become the philosophy of the day first. You're
you
not listening to
argued
what I'm
you
saying.
argued that anarcho-capitalism would spring up if we had the right philosophy, right?
It has to become the philosophy of the day.
Well, it has to become the philosophy of the day, but knowing objectivism is a philosophy that would lead to anarcho-capitalism, and knowing that it is marginal means that it is contradictory to the conclusion you're
No,
making.
because objectivism is not the philosophy of the day.
I mean, and this is just propositional logic 101.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know. Let me jump in there. I'm being a little passive, everybody, because I'm not on the camera. And for anyone who doesn't remember, I got a little thing going on my face. Let's not look too deeply into it. That's why. Miguel, maybe there's a little miscommunication here. So I want to just maybe clarify something that we shouldn't be taking for granted is understood. So when we're talking about the philosophy of the day, what's being discussed here is something that is dominant. And I hope Zulu doesn't think that this is reductive, but let's just think of it in a simple way here that it's the majority of people adopt this philosophy. And if it's not the majority of people in a strict numeric sense, at the very least what it is that it's the majority of what's influencing the direction of society. Zulu, nod if I'm going in the right direction with that. That makes sense. Okay, so I'm sure that me and Zulu perhaps are missing something essential, but it is not sufficient to say that, because you're correct. We're saying that if a philosophy that leads to Ancap is the philosophy of the day, then we will see the emergence of Ancap. We are saying that, right? Now you're saying something that we're finding very confusing, and that's why I want to get to the bottom of this. You're saying, well, objectivism is an example of a philosophy that would lead to Ancap if it was the philosophy of the day. And then you're saying that there's some kind of contradiction. So in just a few words, if you could you explain to me how there can be such a contradiction if we're all agreeing here that objectivism is not the philosophy of the day?
I mean, how can you determine it is the philosophy of the day if you haven't seen the effects of it? That's why there's a bit of a confusion. From
okay, we can possibly get into that, but before we get into that, let's just focus on the question I was asking you was, you posited that there was a contradiction between two things, and you made it clear what those two things were. The first one was that objectivism is a philosophy that would lead to Ancap, and the second one is that the philosophy of the day is determining the configuration of society. And you're saying there's a contradiction there. So could you clarify what that contradiction is for us?
Okay, so my contradiction, the contradiction I found was on the quote, let's say, relevance of that philosophy today. Objectivism is a very, very marginal philosophy today. You don't see many. There's a lot more people criticizing it and even ridiculizing it than people taking it seriously, and saying that, like, it's not the philosophy of the day because I don't know. I think there's some issue on how you determine it's not the philosophy of the day unless you have seen
You just
that
said
it
it's
is.
marginal yourself. Why are you confused?
Look,
Why we're not claiming
I'm
it to be
saying,
the philosophy of the day?
I'm saying, I'm
You
saying,
yourself said it was marginal. What are you talking
okay,
about, man?
I'm saying that like you are saying that it's not the philosophy of the day because it's not it's not as seen, it's not dominant, but there's merely I think there's a better explanation to that, and that is
Hold on.
simply to
Before we go on to another explanation, I'm not going to
okay.
stop you from giving that explanation, but we just want to identify what the contradiction is, or I want you to say that you change your mind. There is no contradiction.
Okay, so can you but okay, so you agree that like an anarcho-capitalist society would be born from the philosophy of the day?
If it was a philosophy that brings about Ancap, yes.
I mean, why the additional?
Why am I adding that
Yeah,
qualifying statement?
yeah.
Because we're saying that we're not saying that any philosophy of the day will bring about ANCAP. We're saying the philosophy of the day brings about its corresponding configuration of society. And for like for example, Zulu is positing that the configuration of society that corresponds to objectivism is ANCAP. But there are other philosophies, we can all easily imagine philosophies that don't beget ANCAP. So, for example, socialism and communism, fascism, nationalism, social democracy, all of these are examples of philosophies, or they have philosophies nearby to them that do not admit anarcho-capitalism, right? So
Okay,
it's not that there is any philosophy of the day. We're saying the philosophy begets its corresponding configuration. The current philosophy of the day does not correspond to anarcho-capitalism as a configuration of society.
okay. So I think we could use a better example. Um, could you? Sh- I'm a bit confused on the. Let's say, let's give an example on Germany during the before World War II and the USSR.
Okay, I'll let you go with this, but is this an attempt to explain what the contradiction is?
Yeah,
Okay.
you'd have to show me how. I'll, I'll assume for the sake of it that you both assume that the USSR and Germany were socialist at the time, right? Okay. So my question is, how can you show in the philosophy of the day between Nazi Germany and the USSR that they both had the same results?
Well, that's not the claim. We're not claiming that they have the same results.
But you're
We're,
saying
we're,
you're saying it
hold
leads
on.
to socialism.
Yes, it results in that sense. Yes. So really, the question would be, how can I show that they had the same philosophy of the day, which then led to these socialist societies? Is that the question you're asking?
Mm, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Immanuel Kant comes along. He gets very popular in Germany and Eastern Europe, and he has a son named Hegel, and Hegel just kind of refines Kant's philosophy right down into a nice, neat arrow point by just tossing out the noumenal world. So this philosophy, it leads to total, right down into the metaphysics. It is utterly collectivist. It is utterly anti-reality. You can't go out and learn things. You've just got to do your duty. You've just got to follow what is best for the absolute or for the collective. Do your duty. Um, and this got popular in these regions. And sure enough, you end up with a society which reflects that. You have people marching their fellow countrymen off into gas chambers, or starving them to death, or killing off college professors because those college professors are spreading anti-revolutionary ideas, which are at odds with dialectical materialism, stuff like that. That's what you end up getting. And sure enough, my theory, the theory predicted that, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Because unless I have completely missed some Aristotle level philosopher, I don't think there was one in the period between Immanuel Kant and the great dictators of the 20th century. I don't think there was any answer to the Kantian Hegelian worldview, at least not in Europe or in Asia. There was no answer. America was somewhat more shielded from it, but it was still imported over there thanks to the pragmatists. So that's why they've got their own problems now today. So my theory is accounting for all of this. So I'm just really unsure about how you think this is leading to some contradiction between what our theory is predicting would happen and what actually happens. Because this theory is predicting everything you're throwing at it.
Okay. All right. So I would have to show, for example, the fact that Nazi Germany, National Socialism, sought to put the state as an end when the
No.
Marxist-Leninist socialist projects did not see it as an end.
No.
They,
What
no, I mean,
what
if you
you've
read,
gotta
if
show
you,
is some
okay,
contradiction between
let
what
me
our
let me
theory is
finish. Can you
predicting
let me
and what
finish?
actually happened. That's all you've got to show right now.
Can you? Yeah, I'm. Let me finish.
Miguel, unfortunately, we have to be a little bit
Yeah, I'll just
more concise on account of the
no,
fact that there's been much ado without much progress towards like a central and frankly not tremendously complicated contention here.
okay.
So we don't
I'll
want to
just be finishing.
we don't want to explore any more historical examples and go through long-winded, at least in terms of how much space we have here in the context of this call-in show. We want to just stick to the question that we're asking is you put forward that there's a contradiction, and we'd really just like to hear what the contradiction is. And please don't try to answer that question by saying, well, let's look at this historical example. Let's just hear, if you could please, for our sakes, what is the contradiction?
The contradiction. I mean, I'm very troubled by the question, but I would just have to say that you are inferring the philosophy of the day as the determinant of a society. And I'm doing the same, except I'm showing you that there's issues in which the ideological line of a society does not always correspond to the to what has led, or it's not the causation. And I've been able to show this with the French Revolution. I've been able to show this. I wanted to show this with Nazi Germany and the USSR, because Nazi Germany saw the state as an end. Merely, this USSR wanted to see it as a intermediary step. I mean, it's literally the basics of dialectical materialism, at least to Stalin.
How does that
That's all.
demonstrate contradiction? Because my theory
I
is
just explained.
that you would get
I mean,
Nazi
you-
Germany at that time, or something like Nazi Germany at that time. So where's the contradiction here? My theory says nothing about whether they would talk about the state as an end or what have you. It says nothing about that.
I mean, if it's not an end, then it would have been different. No,
Jesus
It
Christ,
doesn't
what is the
matter. It doesn't
had to
matter
be
at all.
It is different. It is
It doesn't-
different.
It
There
doesn't
is-
matter at all whether or not the society is like this is some specific attribute of what the philosophy of the National Socialists was, but that's essentially an entire category away from what we're trying to ask. So what Zulu is emphasizing here with his repeated questions is that what we're saying is the dominant philosophy in society, the one that's either, like I said earlier, is it the one that the most individuals hold, or if it's fewer individuals, is it the more influential individuals? In any case, the dominant philosophy in society is what is determining the configuration of society. Now, like Zulu said, all of these examples that you've brought up, the USSR, East and West Germany, the Third Reich before the Second World War. These are all examples where the dominant philosophy was clearly, and when we say clearly, the link is direct between what is the dominant philosophy of the individuals in that country and what is that country doing? What are those groups of people doing? So we're just asking you now, we're not seeing a contradiction. Where is the contradiction between
I mean,
saying the
you're essentially
dominant?
begging the question after I just explained.
That is
I mean,
not begging the question.
okay,
Sir.
okay. If my answer isn't satisfactory enough, I mean, this is basically the most basic method to analyzing history. I don't have any answers, and I don't want to take up much space. I would like to come on the show on another day and explain myself again.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We invite you to, I mean, it sounds like your plan is to prepare. So we encourage you to, we do this every week. So we're looking forward to hearing back from you next week. If you think you can keep it under 20 seconds, you want to have the last word?
No, I think it's been a good conversation. There's
All right.
definitely some things I disagree, but yeah.
Well, thanks so much. We've got lots of good notes here, and we'll go ahead and we'll move on to our next caller. Thanks so much for calling in. That was a long one, so we appreciate you staying on the line with us. See you next week, hopefully.
See you. Bye.
Goodbye, sir. All right, we got our next caller. He's coming right up. Lex, are you with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks so much for waiting for so long.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what your question is because it was asked about an hour ago. So why don't you just jump into it for us, and we'll go from there.
So I listened to you at the beginning talking about feudalism, and I just wanted to mention the reason why I think that anarcho-capitalism ends as feudalism. So the question was about that.
Cool, absolutely. So where do you want to start?
So actually, I want to connect what the previous caller was talking about. So I think that the problem is that obviously Ancap ideology is not exactly the same as feudalism. Obviously, it's a different philosophy. There are different values. There are different norms. But when I see that ideology and I try to simulate it in my mind, I think that is going to end up as feudalism because there are just some power structures that are going to make that more probable than staying as Ancap society forever.
Cool.
Could you explain what those structures are that would turn anarcho-capitalism into some sort of feudalism?
So first, if right now the way to achieve anarcho-capitalism is somehow make the state less powerful, right? Give the power to private institutions instead, right? Is that
no,
good,
that is not correct.
Okay, so what other way are you going to install?
So it's important, I think, to say that what we want to do now, you're definitely invoking something adjacent to where we are, which is we want to weaken the state. But the state has certain attributes that are non-negotiably objectionable to us. And one of those things is the monopoly on violence and the claim that it makes to being able to justify aggression against people. So we have no interest whatsoever in taking things like that and giving it to private institutions. We don't think the right to aggress is something that should be in private hands. We don't think that the ability to tax makes sense anyway.
So sorry, not everything. You don't like everything about the state, but there are some institutions that you think that needs to be given to private hands, like protecting private property.
Sure.
Okay, so what would you cut with the state? You would cut everything, but let's talk it. If you talk more practically, well, for example, what would you cut?
Well, everything. Like you were right the first time.
Okay, so I'm trying to imagine you get into power. You have Libertarian Party in power in the state. So it's not completely. It doesn't control the whole state. It controls just it's not 100%, but it's powerful enough to do some things. I'm trying to be more realistic than just giving you all the society, right off the bat. So.
Well, so yeah, we would get rid of whatever we can whenever we can.
Okay, so welfare probably that would go first. I think that maybe I can phrase it differently. I think that the state would probably protect their monopoly on violence the most. Right, that's the most important thing for it.
Yeah, you'd certainly try to.
Okay, so by giving this, you would remove welfare. You would give the protection of private property. Would give it to private institutions. Then, wouldn't that just be you giving power to different institutions that has the same power as the state?
Well, not the same, different in the way that GALs are explained. That we don't want them to be able to have the power to tax or commit aggression, things like that.
No, but they would have the guns.
Sure.
So how would you prevent them from doing what the state is doing right now?
Well, I'd wave my magic wand, and then they wouldn't be able to do it. Like,
sounds like it.
Hold on, let's see if my famous. Sorry, I shouldn't say famous. Let's see if my completely unknown but personally favored explanation is going to have any utility here. Okay, so the question is, these new private institutions are going to have guns, and I think what you're really trying to invoke, and tell me if I'm off base here, but you're trying to say, how can a stateless society solve the problem of some people are going to want to commit aggression, right? And so let's just think about that in a slightly adjusted framing. Let's ask, can a group of individuals who are all committed to not committing aggression, can they provide this service without committing aggression in the process? So let's make this a microcosmic size just for ease of explanation. But if you really insist, we can make it a bigger group just to carry up the hypothetical. But let's say that Liquid Zulu and I are both going to be committed to non-aggression, which is not a very unlikely scenario. And we become aware that this other third person, not the caller on this show, but this other third person is saying, no, I'm not interested in non-aggression. I'm going to continue to do aggression. So can Liquid Zulu and I come up with a way to defend ourselves from this aggressor? And is it possible that we can do this without committing aggression ourselves?
Okay, maybe I skipped a step, and the step is the inequality of the power. So not everybody is going to have the same amount of guns, if I say it like that. Not everybody is going to have the same resources, same, I guess, people on their territory. So sure, there will be, I would say, pockets of people with guns that came together and they have enough resources, but they would.
Right. So what really is being invoked here, I think, is this notion that if we take the state and we assume that the state has this sort of like absolutely non-competing level, like nobody can compete with the level of force that they're capable of applying. And I think Zulu, hold on just one moment. I think Zulu might disagree with that, because Zulu might bring up things like, for example, how the United States has been defeated in battle before against countries like Vietnam, or the USSR was defeated by Afghanistan, things like this. I think the Americans much more recently were defeated by Afghanistan, as a matter of fact. So what we're interested in here is not that we don't need to deny that, even though potentially we could. What the real question is it necessarily the case? Okay, we get rid of the state now. The state's going to take all their guns, and they're like, okay, well, we're just going to give it all to Amazon. And then Amazon goes, wait, we have all the guns now, so we're just going to be a state now because that benefits us, right? The transition, you could actually do a transition from one state to another state. You could do a transition from one state to a non-state that becomes a state, right? This isn't a problem for us because we already have a state in the first place. much more likely and much more reasonable, I think, is that if we get rid of these public properties, we get rid of these public institutions and all the assets that are owned by these public institutions, we distribute them in such a way in that process. And I don't think that this requires much oversight. I think that this is just naturally how things would fall apart, that they're going to be distributed over society rather than just handing the monopoly from one element to another
Okay.
element.
But what you are saying you that you need to equalize the power, which is my argument. Because if you do that, then your society is going to be anarcho-capitalist, which is based on inequality.
No, I
Because
don't think we're saying that you have to equalize the power distribution. I'm saying that if you, for some reason, assume that the power of the state is dissolved, but is transferred in its entirety to some other element, that creates perhaps a temptation for that other element to try to
you
become
can,
a state.
even if you magically destroyed the state's guns or whatever, you would still remain with unequal distribution of other resources, and this inequality would allow some people to hoard those resources.
So let me just ask you a hypothetical really
So-
quickly to make sure I'm understanding. If I have, since you invoked the idea that we could just snap our fingers and magically get rid of the state. So
Even if
even if. So let me ask a follow-up question. If we have two small tribes and one tribe is going to be on slightly more fertile ground than the other tribe, and it has slightly more mineral resources. So clearly there's an inequality here built right into them, to those tribes' existence in the locations that they occupy. Does that inequality imply that inevitably that one tribe is going to come to dominate the other, and just it's completely unavoidable that one is going to conquer the other?
no, you would have two tribes, which I'm trying to explain that after the state is destroyed, you would have anarcho-capitalist society would look like feudalism.
No, let's just hold on. I'm not
decentralized.
trying to. I just wanted you to answer my question.
Okay,
first, right?
sorry.
So you see that a degree of inequality, this is what I was invoking with my tribe example. So you see that the small amount of inequality does not imply that one's going to become a conqueror over the other.
Maybe there is some miscommunication, because when I talk about feudalism, I mean not just
No, it's fine. That's fine. I just
not
want to
just the
go step by step,
decentralization.
right? So if I'm trying to make
Okay,
this
I
really,
agree
I'm
with
trying
you.
to
I agree.
lubricate this conversation
Yes.
by making it as simple as possible. And every time I
Okay,
get you with like a yes or no question and we go down like some other total non yes or no answer, it just I
Okay,
think
then
it's adding a lot of
answer is
friction.
yes. Yes. They,
Okay.
the small inequality would not be that important.
So the reason I brought that up is because I'm understanding correctly, I believe, that you're saying that if the state dissolves, the society that's left over, even if it's a real anarcho-capitalist society, the individuals in that society are going to be unequally endowed. So they're going to have access to different physical attributes. They're going to have access to different amounts of savings and capital goods. There's going to be factory owners. There's going to be CEOs. There's going to be homeless. And there's this distribution, right? So what you agreed with me about the two tribes is that a distribution of power, as you're calling it power, I'm just more talking about it in the economic goods, does not imply that there's any sort of expectation of an inevitable conquest, right? So if we end up in a society where we have this sort of unequal distribution, why should we be concerned about that?
Because there are other things that let me explain. First is that those tribes you mentioned, the difference is slight. So while there would be there could be some kind of inequality there, there is not enough of it to show some kind of dependency. But if you're homeless and your only way to get food is to do something you don't really want to do, but you have less of a leverage over your freedom, because the resources that you need are somebody else is guarding them, and they will give it to you only if you do a favor for them. So the inequality I'm talking about is inequality in dominance hierarchies. That's the term. where some people own resources, like mostly land. That's the most important one, that produces food for the people, and the people cannot get the resources elsewhere. That's important. Because why would you do something you don't want to do if you can get food from a different source? So these two, when you have these two things, which are necessary part of capitalism, then you will end up with this structure.
Zulu, I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Would you like to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. I suppose I'm just what I think we're trying to get at here is that just having these inequalities in dominance hierarchies, that doesn't imply that you're going to have aggression. Like I'm curious, because clearly you think it does, in fact, imply that. Like, I want to know, how specifically is it the case that if you've got, for instance, different like insurance firms or what have you, who are employed in the task of defending the rights of their customers, I want to know, how specifically does this inevitably end up in presumably the insurance companies becoming like feudal lords and engaging in aggression? Like, I'm just not seeing that connection there.
But can we agree that the dominance hierarchies are something that we can expect in capitalism?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that okay, so it's going to be a little bit difficult because I think we have different views on aggression, but I think that like what is the necessary distinction, and don't use aggression, try to be more specific, about feudal lord and a capitalist property?
Well, the distinction is aggression, so I am going to use that.
Oh, okay, but
see, the thing is, I just want to point in here. I sort of jump in, but like, you got to understand when you ask us to avoid using aggression, that the entire worldview that we're advocating for is one that emphasizes distinguishing between aggression and non-aggression. We are against the state on the basis that we're distinguishing between it and its alternatives.
I'm not
with the criteria of aggression.
To tell you to like stop arguing. I'm just trying to so you can give me what you actually mean by that aggression, because like, what is the difference between? I cannot see any material difference in a society where my only choice is to work for a capitalist and live in their capitalist apartment that I don't own and I need to rent, and I can buy only what is allowed in the company town. Like,
so you have other choices. You could, in fact, walk off into nature and try to live off the land if you wanted to. There are many choices. You could go to any number of different places. You could live with really family. You could get a job with somebody else. There are all kinds of choices you have. Like, there's this.
Can I pick them up, because none of it.
Sure, go ahead.
Just to point out, of course, you have different choices. First choice you mentioned was simply to leave the society. So the society doesn't actually tells me anything, and leave where? Because I actually cannot leave your society, technically speaking, because I cannot suddenly decide. I cannot suddenly decide to ignore private property.
Here, I think this might. I think I may have a really expedient way to get to the issue that's present here. Right. So let's just go back and forth with this hypothetical that you put forward really quickly. Okay. If there's all these people in society, and if you think I get one of these premises wrong, just jump right in and tell me I'm wrong. So you got all these people in this hypothetical society, and they are, let's say you mentioned they have to only buy what the company at the company store, what the company store wants to sell them at the price the company store wants to charge, right? So let's say we live in this company town and we say, heck, I don't want to pay that price for that food anymore. Let's just all get together and we won't buy it anymore. And then that's going to force the company, because we object. We find patronizing this institution objectionable. And the concern is, well, it's food. So the company can just be like, well, screw these guys. We're just going to, we aren't going to lower our prices. We're just going to let all of our customers die and all of our workers die. And now that's a desirable thing. The worker has no power here whatsoever because it's food we're talking about, even though the choice that the company town is left with is either that they lower their prices or all of their employees and customers die. So I would argue that that actually is some leveraging power right off the bat. But let's say that the manager is actually a serial killing psychopath. And despite the fact that being a serial killing psychopath makes it kind of hard to be a manager, let's just say we'll grant that.
Can you stop? I think that I agree with you that there is a collective bargaining power the people can have. But first of all, that's an argument for why we should have socialism then, because you are just saying that, okay, so obviously these people should change their property owners. The whole property.
No, I'm sorry, you're smuggling something in there fairly transparently, because what I just described doesn't require any kind of greater than individual property ownership. It's completely obtainable. The collective bargaining is entirely possible in anarcho-capitalism.
You are right that it's like you don't have to go to the actual like end of the logic of the collective. They can just say, well, we can bargain with the owner. Okay.
Right. So then, we can bargain successfully with the owner. So then, what are we worried about in the first place? You brought this hypothetical up
because the bargaining power of the owner is him owning the resources, and the collective has to go together. They have to gather the resources enough for them to have the time to negotiate. They have to be cognizant of people that would sabotage their collective bargaining, and they would have to be afraid of the private police that's going to shoot them, stuff like that. So this is talking into two different worlds here. Like, why did feudalism survive so long? Was it because
let's not divert to feudalism surviving. Let's kind of get to the bottom of this thing we're already talking about. The original Nzulu, jump in here at any point if something jumps out at you that I may be making a mistake or something pressing happens. But I understood that this company town hypothetical was presented to us because it establishes some kind of hey, this is something that could happen in Ancap that's really bad. But then we fully agreed that this is not nearly as bad as it was first said. And we also showed that the solution to this, which is in a form of this is collective bargaining, doesn't require anything more than what's already present in Ancap. It's completely
maybe I can help with this. So you mentioned that the workers could come together and they could go to the owner and told him, you are dependent on our labor. We are dependent on your land, but you are dependent on our labor. And that's the relationship. And that's true. Couldn't that be the same for the slaves doing that to the master, or the feudal peasants doing that to the lord?
Well, if the feudal peasants said that, then they could be locked up in jail. You would just lock them up in jail. Go, nope. Sorry, you're trying to start some sort of a revolution here. Not happening. Or if it's a slave, it's like, hey, slave there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to whip you until you bleed, and then I'm going to leave you out, and you're not going to get any food or water today. That's the difference there.
Sorry, you missed the comparison. I was talking about a group of them, just like the workers, not one person.
Again, if a group of medieval peasants tried saying that they're still going to be living on the Lord's land, quote unquote, because obviously it's not actually his land. If they're claiming that they're still going to be living under this Lord, but they're not going to be dealing with his laws anymore, he would send in his men, and they would be arrested. The ringleaders would be arrested. Anybody who tried to stop them would be arrested or stabbed. And quite frankly, a lot of them might end up getting put to death. The death penalty is a very common thing back then.
And the capitalists couldn't do that because...
Correct. So you're specifically comparing different configurations of society. And the society and these configurations that are being compared are different in that aggression is not permissible in one of them. That is the difference that we're pointing out.
But who makes it impossible? There is no God that's going to...
No. Hold on. Let me make something... I want to clarify here. So there's no such thing as a system of any kind, except one in which there's no people at all, where aggression is impossible in a physical sense. So we're not suggesting that aggression is impossible at all. We're saying that the framework defines aggression as impermissible. In feudalism, it's equally possible for you to break into your neighbor's house and kill them as in any other system. The difference is in Ancap, it is always proscribed. We always say aggression is never okay. It doesn't matter if you're a huge capitalist. It doesn't matter if you're homeless and need food. It doesn't matter if you're a factory owner or a priest. You can never
aggress. Just propaganda. Like you are just saying we swear we are good boys, but in the reality,
I'm really sorry that you think it's propaganda, but what you're suggesting that we're being dishonest about is the central identifying thing in our whole ideology.
But like I'm trying to show you that I see that it's completely the same. You agreed that if a group of peasants try to give using their bargaining power against the feudal lord, that the feudal lord they could use force against them. I'm saying that could happen in a capitalism too. Which you agree that it could happen.
Yeah, we're not advocating for our system on the basis that it's impossible for aggression to happen. That is not one of the arguments that we put forward for why anarcho-capitalism ought to be pursued in the first place. And since you already said in your own words that weakness is equally present in every system, it doesn't make any sense logically to leverage it as a weakness in any system.
No, the weakness. I'm not saying that that Ancap is special in that the bad stuff can happen. I'm saying that the exact same structure of power is in the capitalist forum and in the feudal lord. It's completely the same. The only difference is names right now.
Right. So let's just simplify this. We have two islands. One is anarcho-capitalist and one is feudal. And on these islands, each island is two people. One person's totally naked. The other one is armored and has a sword. Okay? The only difference between these two islands is the philosophy that these two people are using to... No, like that is what we're saying. We're comparing the philosophies that the individuals in society are adhering to, right? That's what we're comparing. If you say no, then we don't have anything to talk about.
No, I'm saying
Zulu, jump in here. I feel like I don't want to make sure I'm not going astray.
That's entirely correct.
If you think that that's the distinction, I don't think so, because I see the similarity in material things, which is the ownership of land and resources that gives the power.
Ownership is not purely material qualifier, though. Ownership is a moral, philosophical concept. So,
I'm talking
indeed, the philosophy on the feudal island would be that the Lord owns everything that the sun touches within this fief. Right? That would be the philosophy. Whereas the philosophy on the Ancap island would be you own the things that you first appropriate from nature. So it is this philosophical difference that Galazar is pointing to. That is the only difference. So you're saying, well, they both own things, right? They're both claiming ownership over certain things. But that is a philosophical thing they're doing. So it is the philosophy which is different here. That's what makes the difference.
Sure, but what they are doing is they're using force, to protect and control this land, which other people need to live.
Okay.
And the people who need the land cannot live without the land, and the only way to get there without being, aggressed upon, is to sell their labor to the feudal lord or the capitalist.
I'm confused now. Please jump in, Galazar, if you think I'm going down too much of a tangent here. But I'm confused. Like, what would your alternative to this be? Because I'll tell you what we need to live. We need production to live. And you're not okay with ownership, okay? You keeping people from resources. Well, I mean, the fundamental point is that resources are scarce. If I'm going to use some apple to feed my body, I am in fact preventing everybody else from being able to do the same thing with that apple.
Yes.
I'm preventing everybody else from doing that. So it's just a fact of reality. So you need that production to live. And so would your alternative be no ownership? You're not allowed to do any production. Well, then everybody's going to die definitely, even faster. You don't even get the option of going out into the woods and trying to live for yourself. You no longer even get that option. At least under us, you do get that option if you're truly destitute.
You can always leave. Sorry, I would also allow people to leave. But okay, I think this is. I think we moved a little bit.
I just want to clarify there. You would allow people to leave. So would, under whatever your system is, would you allow me and Galazar to go off into the woods and start building like a little hut? We're going to start making a little anarcho-capitalist region, and people can come into this region, and they can, we're making God's Gulch out there in the woods.
Would you?
Under your system, would you be completely fine with that, and us using force to protect that?
Well, if you would accept my property philosophy, then yeah, sure. Just like you would allow me to leave if I respected your private property, right?
Your theory of property would be completely allowing of a region which is totally adhering to the NEP.
I'm trying to say that I would do that in the same way you would do that. In your view, you would also allow me to leave, right?
In the way that I would allow you to leave is that you've got to stick by the NEP the whole time. Leaving isn't this thing where you're just allowed to suddenly go off and start murdering people. You'd be allowed to go out into the woods and acquire things from nature and start producing for yourself. You'd be allowed to do that, yes. Are you agreeing with us on the NEP, therefore? Are you saying that, yes, I completely agree with the NEP, and people should be allowed to go off?
No, I'm agreeing.
So you're going to prevent us from doing that?
I'm agreeing with the same logic, which is that I have an ideology, you have an ideology, which allows, we both allow other people to leave our policy, but we would still force them to respect our
I really want, like, direct specifics here. Are you in fact claiming that if me and Galazar were to go out into the woods and try to produce things for ourselves, that you would want to stop that or not?
No, you could do that.
So we would be allowed to do that?
Until you start doing capitalist things, then sure.
So capitalist things like production?
Like owning means of
right,
production.
owning the things that we're producing. So yes, you would indeed.
If you are producing, I don't
yes,
care.
You would indeed want to go out and stop us from using our own property to do what we want. So then we actually aren't allowed to just leave.
You still don't get it. It's one-to-one.
We don't actually get that option. So I was correct.
No, you don't understand, because you are smart.
In our system, you get that option to go out and start producing on your own.
Let me explain.
In your system, we don't get that option.
Let me explain. It's very simple. Like, in your ideology, I could also go outside, right? But I would still have to respect your private property.
Yes.
Okay. So in the same way, you could also leave, but you will still have to respect my arguing against for some like anarchist property.
Right. And in your argument against anarchist property, your system would have to prevent us, as you've said, from going out and producing things on our own. No, right? That's all very capitalist. You on your thesis, we should be able to we should be prevented from doing that type of thing. So when
I don't want to get into this,
I think we should go over the flow again. How we got here was that I was saying your alternative. I'm confused about your alternative, right? At least everybody just dies because nobody's allowed to do any production any longer, and so. But on our alternative, at the very least, you get to go out and produce on your own. If you're totally destitute, and you're saying, well, no, you also get to do that on my system. That is, in fact, not the case.
Come on now. It's going. Let's not get into it because there was so much like different understanding of what property means, what capitalism means. So let's just put it aside because I think that
I've erroneously quoted the flow here. I think that was exactly how we got here.
Yeah, no, you were talking about how I would ban production, but like I'm saying let's not go there, please. Let's not go there, please. Instead, there was
we got here from you saying that well on our system, people need these things to live, and that's what's problematic about our system.
Yes,
people need these things to live, but I'm saying on your system, in fact, you are preventing people from getting to the things they need to live, even more so. Because they don't even have that last resort.
No, you are putting words in my mouth. Stop it. Come on, let me speak.
Where did I make an error in the flow there?
You skipped so far ahead that I had no time to speak. So there was a nice, you said one nice thing that was great. You said that if somebody eats an apple, they exclude everybody else from that apple. That's true. We should let people eat their apples. That's fine. But the specific property I was talking about was property such, let's say, an orchard filled with apples. And you are saying it's fine to have one person own this orchard, which
Yes.
other people could use to eat.
What's your problem with
But-
that?
Well, the problem is that instead you could have them collectively own this orchard, and everybody could use that orchard and have their apples.
I'm not asking
but
for an
in-
alternative. I'm asking what your problem with the single person owning it is.
Okay, so the problem is that they would use this orchard to use their hunger and tell them, you can have the apples if you work for me, and you have to listen to my rules.
And what's
And-
problematic about that?
I like freedom. Sorry, I guess.
So what's
What do
problematic
you-
with it is that you like freedom?
No, I like freedom. That's why it's problematic, because that's obviously not freedom. That's
Yes, it's
slavery.
problematic because you like freedom.
What?
Zulu,
saying-
maybe I can jump in here and break the stalemate a little bit,
Sure.
if I may. So I feel like I have a good grasp of what specifically, Lex, it is that you're concerned about, and I want to take a crack at it. So it's kind of like this: if we are in a society and you're born, you start to exist at a certain time, and at that time, let's just say that all the other stuff on Earth is owned already. So like if we imagine like the feudal times, if we want to be in the Middle Ages, it's conceivable that, hey, I'm going to just go out and I'm going to start my own homestead, and there's potentially unowned land or whatever. But let's say hypothetically there's a situation where that's not the case. Everything is owned already. So you're born, everything's owned, and now because everything's owned, the only option you have to obtain the sustenance you need to live is you need to find somebody who's willing to employ you so you can work and get food. Am I kind of like on the right track here?
Yeah, that's the right track. Yeah.
Okay, so what is, if you don't mind, just quickly, like in a short sentence here, what is the problem with that
Well,
specifically?
because okay, this is I did not expected that. Well, okay, the problem is that you cannot really make decisions for yourself, because they would not only employ you, they could, by employing you, they can boss you all around. They can demand you to do whatever they want because you have no other options. So you give them little, and they you give them a lot, and they give a little because they have the leverage. So you lose. You have no say in basically any political decision because they have the power over you. Like, do you understand what
Okay.
I mean?
I'm gonna have to say that I don't really understand what you mean in the
Okay,
sense
so maybe
that
I can just explain
those
this.
aren't very concrete.
This is like, if you look at anthropology and the study of creation of states or stuff like that, this is exactly what happened. If people own land that other people depend on them, on the land, then suddenly they depend on the other people. And if you have two groups of people and one group is depending on the other group, the group that has all these people depending on them have the power to decide what they want. They can decide the rules of the society. They can decide, well, everything. They are the ruling class then.
Okay, so
It's-
specifically, when you're in a condition where you depend on someone else in this way, what is the harm that comes from that you would like to avoid?
You are not deciding for yourself. They decide for you. They tell you, okay, you can have this food, but you have to work for me these 12 hours, and you have to do exactly this thing. And maybe you think that there is a better way to do it. Maybe you think that you can do it only, you can work only 8 hours because you are sick, but they don't care. They are telling you this. You have to listen. I'm like trying to explain what is freedom here. I don't
Yeah,
get it.
that's fine. I understand.
Like,
I'm following you.
the-
I'm following along. So now, in a socialist society, as a comparison, let's contrast that with a socialist society. In a socialist society, the state is going to actually produce and provide the food so that you're free from this situation where someone else has the power to tell you what to do.
no.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Can we just agree that what I said applies to capitalism? Because you are
That
arguing how it's
if you
good.
want something that someone else has and you want to get it without doing an aggression, then you need to obtain it through trade, and that includes food.
But
So
trade can be unequal,
anytime
right?
somebody has something you want, they have power over you. I'm saying that in scare quotes, in the sense that if they want to give it up to you, then they set the price, basically.
Okay, but when we talk about power, we mean decision making, freedom. So I'm saying that I think you agree with me right now, but you are because you are arguing how it's a good thing or a necessary thing.
Well, right now, I'm trying to delay saying whether it's a good or necessary thing, and I want to evaluate the two competing systems and see how they shape up against each other, and then maybe based on that, I'll make a determination about which one's better or good. Is that fair?
No, if it's good or bad, but I'm more interested if it's like if there are other options than these two.
Okay, well,
either
we are. I don't think we're gonna be able to explore all
Okay,
of the possible
sure.
configurations of
So
society. So let's compare two first, and if that's productive, then maybe we can move on to a third and a fourth. Okay.
I think there are only two. So
Okay, so we've got the free society, let's call it for short, and then on the alternative, we've got the socialist society. So am I characterizing the socialist society correctly when I say that in that society they are going to the state
Oh.
will produce and provide food so that all of its citizens are free from this sort of coercive element of having to work for food?
no, it's not having to work for food. It's having to work for somebody else who makes the decision for you. That's the problem. Obviously, you have to work in society. Everybody's going to work in society. Like that's how we produce things that we need to live. But giving the control over this production to small minority is them giving the power, just like the kings before. And also, it's not the state. Like the most important part of socialism is the democracy, is the collective. So on one side, you might have one person deciding what are the rules in society, and on other society you have democratic rules. People themselves create the rules.
Right. So if a
themselves.
group
So
of people are a society and they say, okay, I want to be free to do whatever I want without having other people having power over me. Right. That's what they're saying. And so one of them says, okay, I'm going to be a painter, and another one says I'm going to be a car mechanic, and another one says I'm going to be a heavy equipment operator, all these sorts of things, right? And then they realize nobody, or at least not enough people, want to produce food to feed everybody. So they say, okay, we're going to take a vote, and we're going to decide who has to make the food. Okay. And so you want to be a car mechanic, but everybody else voted that you're going to be the farmer who makes all the grain. So it's okay in this case to have power over someone else and force them to do the thing they don't want to do
but
because you voted for it.
well, I'm telling you, there are only two options. There are not. I cannot think about any other option. Then
No, I'm not asking you to think about other options. I'm just
Okay,
trying to
no,
ask you
okay.
yes or
So
no. Am I making sense here? Did the statement
I
that I
think that
made make sense?
the better way to say it is that you have collective decision making of that group, and it's not just a vote like that. It's if you look at societies with direct democracies, for example, then you can see how it works. Like the people make decisions, as a collective, and of course they make decisions that can be something that the one individual doesn't like, or it gets against their wishes. Obviously, there is still power. It's just collective power, controlled by all of them. So
Right. The
instead of
specific,
owned
I
by
hear
one
you.
person.
I totally understand. So the specific thing that you said was objectionable was that in certain circumstances, someone else has power over you. But it is logically the case that that cannot be something you object to because you are okay with other people having power over you in certain circumstances.
No, I'm saying that power is necessary part of politics. You need to enforce rules. You need to decide conflicts that cannot, they are contradictory. So you have to decide what's going to happen.
Unfortunately, that statement you just made did not address the problem that I'm drawing attention to, because you were objecting to a certain state of affairs on the basis that that state of affairs featured this characteristic. And that characteristic
No,
was, yes, that was the basis that you
it was
offered.
not. Okay, sorry. Maybe I should be more clear, because what I was objecting was the lack of decision you have in the society. Okay, obviously you can have all the decisions, but if you live under a dictator, you have less of a decision in the society, in the collective decision making than in democracy. You have more. You don't have absolute one, obviously, because as I said, there are restrictions for that. But you have more of it, and if you have more of a decision, then you have more freedom, which is why we have French Revolution. All of its slogans were equality and liberty together.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're taking the logic here seriously. So are you changing your mind now, and you're no longer disagreeing with anarcho-capitalism on the basis that it has the characteristic of some people having power over other people?
No, I'm saying that some people is doing like a lot of work here.
No, I know. Look, so let's try to answer the question without not answering the question. Let's try to answer the question in a more direct way. So earlier, I'm just saying this to be clear, because I want to facilitate like the proposition directly. So earlier you mentioned specifically the criticism of the anarcho-capitalist state of affairs was that it possesses the characteristic that some people have power over other people. And since that statement was made, you've observed that two things. One, another system has that characteristic, but it's acceptable. And two, this characteristic is a necessary part of all political configurations. So
I think I think this was just like me phrasing in the conversation in that way. But like, I think that when I say that, when I see the democratic power, then it's like everybody is deciding for themselves, and sometimes it is going to go more beneficial for the individual that is deciding together with others. Sometimes it doesn't, because that's just how it works. But on the other hand, somebody else is having all the decision power, and the rest has none. So it's like, sure, like to me, it's like you are looking at the very edges of that are similar. When the Venn diagrams are basically just touching, if you understand, it's like nitpicking the small details that are like.
Okay, so just yes or no. I want to know if I'm making a true statement here. Is it the case that you agree with the following? Anarcho-capitalism is objectionable to you on the basis that in that system, people have power over other people.
I would say that it's objectionable because they have more power than other systems. Or I would say that there is less freedom because I have less decision power than.
So you want to, am I understanding correctly that your priority then is you're going to accept whichever political system involves people having the least power over each other?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay. So
I would say that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's fair. So let's say me and you agree. We're on the same side. We both want to find the political system in which the participants in that system have the least power over each other. Can we work together on that?
Okay, sure.
Okay. So in anarcho-capitalism, and this is not an argument here as much as this is a description. Okay. In anarcho-capitalism, you and the things that you own are totally unassailable unconditionally by everybody else. The only way that those things can become available to other people is if you use them to aggress in the first place. So that's the only thing that political system is saying. Now, the competing system here, the one that's alleging to be more free, it is completely possible for me to wake up someday and have found out that other people decided to take my house away from me or to use my body in a way that I disagree with. I could be sent to a job that I don't want to work. I could have my business taken off of me for the purposes of socialization. So to me, it seems like that system is almost infinitely more such that people in that system have power over each other.
I think that
can you help me reconcile?
Yeah.
So please help me reconcile those two differences.
You compare two different things. You compared the organization of the decision making the democracy, with the rules of the society, which is private property in your view. No, different thing, the different categories. Instead, you should, if you want to compare democracy, you should compare it to the decision-making power in your society. Who has the power to make decisions? Well, it's the owners. They have the most power. And if you don't own, well, the more you own, the more decisions you have, the more power you have to make decisions. So,
Okay, I think maybe I'll try again. So we're going to compare, me and you we're teammates here, and we're interested in finding that we're going to make a rule for society, and all the people participating in that rule are going to have more or less power over each other. That's what we're evaluating. And the two systems, the two rules that we're comparing are, on one hand, the rule that Liquid Zulu and I would put forward is that your body and your property are unassailable. And the competing rule is that we're going to make decisions about how things get used collectively. In other words, it is
okay,
possible.
That's phrased better, yeah.
Okay, so those are the things we're comparing.
Yep. So obviously, if we say that private property is legitimate source of power, then what would? So I think that's the difference. I would say that the actual collective decision making would create better society because we would decide without anybody being the one dominant.
I don't want to cut you off here, but I just want to reemphasize that we agreed to a certain framework here. And the framework that we agreed to was me and you are working together to find the situation, the rule that creates the least amount of people having power over each other.
Yep.
Now we're talking about something else. You're talking about okay, but now let's talk about the society creates. Maybe it's better in some other metric.
Well,
okay, we can do that. I can follow you to a new topic, but if we do that, I want to hear first that you agree with me that the rule that you're putting forward puts more people in power over each other in more ways.
No. No. The people, there would be less people in your society, but those less people, the minority, would have most power. So that's what I dislike about it. That's why I'm against it. So you just rephrase my description why I dislike it. I dislike it because you are saying, well, who would have the power over other people? Well, just 5 people, but they would have all the power over you. So you would have no power, but so those 5, they would have all power. So obviously that's not what I want. I would rather have some power, just like you and Liquid Zulu, and we can talk together and make decisions. That's much better. Because
Zulu, I've been going on and on. I'm going to say one more thing, and then Zulu, if you don't mind, I want to pass it back to you. So I'm going to say something.
It's getting late.
Yes, sure. I'm going to say one more thing. Our caller can respond as he wishes, and I'll let you take it from there, okay? So I just want to emphasize one last time, because I think there is a certain limit to how useful it is to go in circles. You and I agreed that we're going to work together to evaluate frameworks or rules, and we're going to evaluate them on the criteria of how much power do people have over each other according to that rule. So the first rule we're evaluating is you can absolutely, positively never, under any circumstances, violate someone's ownership over their body or their property. That's the first rule. That's the whole thing. That's the whole philosophy. Next is this rule where we're going to determine how things are used, including bodies, including property, based on a democratic vote. So it's collectivizing this decision-making process. Now, in that system, it follows logically that if people vote that way, you could be alienated from control over your property or over your body. So I'm putting forward that it is absolutely incontrovertible that system promotes a greater amount of power between people over each other. I'm going to let you respond, and then I'm going to let Zulu take it from there.
I think the problem is that, again, you just, I would say that you think that if you establish a rule like this, it's just the rule that everybody's going to follow. But I'm focusing on the part where what kind of social structure is going to evolve from that rule. And basically, your rule states just give power to small minority, and the small minority is going to rule us and make decisions for us. Which maybe I phrase it again not exactly well when I said when talk about how many people have the power over other people. What I meant to say was I have as much decision-making power as possible, and everybody else, because obviously I don't want to be a dictator, so I would want everybody else to have the same power as much as possible to maximize freedom for everybody. So yeah, sorry.
So yeah, I kind of want to dig into this notion of power that you're using here, where the boss apparently is wielding all this like almighty power over you, and simultaneously you somehow don't have any power over him. And like, okay, so what specifically does your system look like? You're making references to democracy. Are you voting in some government, or like what's specifically going on here?
Well, just to contrast with Ancap's, I would say like democratic socialism with market. So you would have a social democratic restriction to market forces, but the market would be run by co-ops.
In what specific, like, I don't want like really nitty gritty. Like, okay, so let's say there was like a shop on some road on the other side of the country from me, and would somebody propose that this shop should raise the price of their watermelon by 12p? Like, who would they propose it to? Like, if they wanted that to happen, or would there just be every day a vote takes place on what the price of watermelon in that shop?
So when I talk practically, I would still have market forces that would determine these things. The only difference in the society I'm describing.
How specifically would they determine these? Because under capitalism, it's not the market forces which are determining the price of those watermelons. It's
okay,
the person who owns those watermelons who's deciding what to sell it for, and the market forces are determining if he's going to be profitable at that price point or not.
If there is a shop in my society, it would be cooperative, probably. So the cooperative would decide these prices.
How specifically?
Well, it depends what they decide, how they decide. That's like their idea. It would be democracy, obviously.
Right, but I want like, so like, would I get to vote?
No, the workers would vote. Like if it's a worker co-op, the workers would go. If it's a consumer co-op, it would be different.
Okay, so I'm not voting on things which are irrelevant to me in the economy.
Again, no, you vote for. You vote in your state.
Well, what's the division of the states?
Sorry, maybe I don't know what you mean. You vote for your state representative, and the workers
so I am voting somebody in.
Sorry?
So I am voting somebody into power.
Yes, you have democratic state.
Okay, so would this person not then have the power over me, and they would just be some sovereign? Like, you still have a sovereign here. Would they not have fantastically more power than a capitalist would have?
Not compared to Ancap. No, because it's a democracy.
Right, they were voted in. Why does that? Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump was voted in. I don't know if you're aware of this. As it turns out, he's very much more powerful than a capitalist is.
Well, yeah, because we don't live in anarcho-capitalism. But in anarcho-capitalism, yes, capitalism would be powerful.
Right, but I'm not seeing how a state sovereign isn't fantastically more powerful than a capitalist who you can just say, no, I don't want to trade with you. I'm going to go trade with somebody else instead. I don't see how, because the state sovereign can just say, no, you're gonna do this trade. Your property, you don't have any property. That's all ours. You're gonna do what we say.
We moved from abstract the debate over a political organization to the specific example here. So
yes,
and when I criticize dominance hierarchies, then democratic hierarchy is not dominance hierarchy because it's bottom up. You voted the people
I
in.
really don't care if it's a dominance hierarchy or not.
Like they have power.
We are to vote in some sovereign.
Okay. So like my point there
gets to determine what happens with any piece of property, no?
Well, it depends on the state rules, and I would support that the state would not have these kind of like draconian rules. Like
I'm not asking about statism in general. I'm asking about your system. What does your system look like? Would we be voting in some sovereign?
We would have democracy, yeah, parliamentary rank choice voting. Yeah.
So we would be voting in some sovereign under your system.
Yeah.
Okay, what does this sovereign do?
Well, I said before, do you know what social democracy is?
No, I'm asking about it. What does this sovereign do?
I don't know what you are fishing for.
What does the sovereign do?
It's creating rules, laws.
He gets to create the rules, okay?
So
he could just say, no, you're no longer allowed to do that. Yes, you're allowed to do this. Seems to me this guy has a hell of a lot of power over me.
God.
I'm in total agreement with the sentiment.
Yeah, because like the whole discussion was about organization of power, and you are like confused about what is representative democracy.
Well, look, let's
how is more or less what I'm saying.
Power over everybody. This
so
seems
condescending.
ridiculous.
Zulu, I apologize to jump in. I'm trying to give you some space here. I just want to say, for the sake of to facilitate the conversation here, let's do our best not to worry so much about that, Lex, because all we're really doing here is asking a question, right? And that's how a conversation like this one has to play out. It has to be based on answering questions, asking questions. So when we're asking you a question about what something is, and you're sort of saying like, well, instead of telling us what it is, you're saying, well, I don't know what you're fishing for here. There's just no way for us to make a productive dialogue out of that. So I want to just know if Zulu is going to ask you a question. Hold on, just one moment here. If Zulu is going to ask you a question and you feel it's condescending, right? Then it's not productive to be in the conversation at all, right? Let's just agree. If you're in a conversation with people and you think they're just not being honest, you shouldn't be there. But if you're in a conversation where you think the opposite, you think that there is a productive exchange happening, then I think the bare minimum has to be that when we ask questions, because we're very interested in answering your questions as well, instead of ignoring the question and saying, I don't know what you're fishing for, it's just a straightforward question. So we can get so much further down the road together if we just focus on answering the questions instead of trying to guess where Zulu's going about them. So let's just pick it up from there, and we'll just try answering the questions.
Sure. So yeah, you're claiming that there is this sovereign who we voted, and he gets the ultimate decision making over how anything's going to be going on in this economy. In what way is this sovereign not of vastly greater amount of power than the capitalist would be in our system?
So I'm trying to simplify it, but obviously when I talk about social democracy or democratic socialism, I'm talking about the more complex democracy that we have now. So it's a parliamentary democracy. So you have parties, they have coalitions, they have you have oppositional party, they have years in terms. So there is distinction between the legislative and all the kinds of branches of government. You have the constitution, you have laws, obviously. You have all kinds of protections. You have human rights. You have so yes. Okay. So still, obviously, the state has power over you. I am not denying that. And obviously, you could find better systems in the sense more democratic, like some anarchist, global anarchist communes. Sure, but like I answered more in practical terms, like what's feasible in the near future, which is more democratic. And the simple thing I did was just remove private property because that's the most authoritarian part of our society right now. So that's
right. So I would not have any protections against agents of the state coming in and telling me how to run my entire goddamn life, because there is no private property. And your assertion is that this is in fact a situation with far less one-sided power than one where a capitalist is offering to hire you and you can reject it.
You would have protections like you have right now. Like you think that if you had private
Which
property,
particular protections?
sorry, if you think that if you had state with private property, you would have more protections.
I'm asking what particular protections I would have under your system.
Well, it would be state from state protections. So, like
what
people
specific protections would I have?
People could not murder you. People could not steal from
The
your
state
house.
couldn't murder me?
Sorry?
The state wouldn't be
No.
allowed to kill me at all.
Like, I don't think that state could murder you. I am against the death
Why not?
penalty. Like, again, like obviously, the state could decide if after the people democratically vote people somebody and they decided that they want to kill people, then that could happen. Like, but that could happen if in capitalism too. So it's like,
well, hold on. We've not left your system though, because your system is based on this voting in of people, and if we vote in this parliament who decides they want to kill me in particular, that's still within your system. We haven't left your system, and I could be murdered. Whereas in my system, for you to get murdered, we would have to leave my system and go into some other system where we've got murderers going around.
Okay, I understand now. Because remember, at the start of this discussion, we mentioned that there are, maybe it was the previous quarter, sorry, there was like talking about how there are things that every ideology, every system has, that you cannot guarantee that something bad is going to happen. So my system can allow bad stuff to happen. Your system can do that too.
It doesn't. But what I'm getting at is that your system doesn't even prescribe those things. It doesn't even say that those things are bad. I have not left your system in this story here.
I was not describing laws. I was describing the organization of power.
Where do the laws come from?
Well, but okay, but
they come from your government, don't they? That's why. That's why you don't want to answer.
Of course, yes.
So yes, indeed.
But
the government decide to enact a new law tomorrow.
No, you are completely right.
Which says Liquid Zulu has to die, and that wouldn't have left your system. We've not left your system. We've not done something that you've prescribed, right?
Of course.
Whereas in my system, for somebody to murder you, we have left my system. I'm prescribing.
This is amazing. You just said it. I understand now. Thank you, because in my system, I was describing practical, material things, and in your system, you just have the idea that people should not murder. And if you have that idea, well, suddenly, if somebody murders, well, they left your system. You are using.
Yes,
you just
we're against
define
murder,
it into.
You apparently aren't, not on principle, at least.
No, I'm obviously against.
If people vote for it.
No, I'm against murder. You are against murder. But
are you always against murder?
Sorry.
Are you always against murder?
Well, probably. Yeah. Maybe there is like some very specific niche thing. And when
if you are always against murder, then you are opposed to democracy. You're opposed to the system you've just laid out for me. Because the system you've just laid out for me allows for murder.
And your system doesn't, because you said that. Because you said that in your system, murder is banned.
Yes, it's no longer my system. If it's engendering murder.
Amazing. Okay. So, I think that this is this is why I like your channel, and I watch your videos, because you clearly states the most obviously stupid things. Like you just defined your ideology in a way that just like.
That's always ridiculous.
I just want to point out that mere moments ago you did criticize us for being condescending.
I know.
I just want to point that out.
I didn't mean. I didn't want to be mean. But like, you just said that your system is good, because if somebody do something bad, well, then it's not your system. It's like amazing. I cannot believe it.
So that isn't what Zulu said at all.
That's exactly what he said.
No. I'm happy to clarify it for you though. So what Zulu said was that if a system it permits murder, that is necessarily logically not his system. Why is he saying that? I'll elaborate because I think it maybe got missed. Zulu is saying that his system, my system also, the system that he and I are advocating for in tandem here, can never produce a prescription of murder. It never condones it. It's not a matter of likelihood or probability, the system that we're advocating for, which is just property rights, by the way, it's not a complicated system. We're just advocating for property rights, can never condone violating property rights, and violating someone's property rights is an intrinsic characteristic of murder, right? So
But
all Zulu is saying
You said
is,
never?
of
But
course,
in the beginning
absolutely.
of the discussion, you said that your system can also do bad things.
No, what? I'm
No,
sorry.
he
I-
was saying that we don't have a magic spell to make sure that nobody ever does anything bad ever. That's what we said. We said that those people are acting against what we're proposing. Whereas what I'm claiming is that the state coming and murdering me because it was voted for, in fact, wouldn't be against what you're proposing.
So if your society worked differently, then you would expect, like, there was some people would just create feudalism. You would say, well, they break my system. That's no longer my system, which is true. It would not
Right.
would
Of course,
not be your
because if
system.
somebody came
Okay,
into your
sure,
system
but that-
and co-opted it and turned it into a dictatorship, like a Stalinist USSR situation, you would probably say, I'm willing to bet that that was a corruption of what you were advocating for, right?
Sure, I agree with this. But the nice thing with that is that I was describing the parts of the system that are different than yours. So when you say, well, murder is impossible in my system,
Nope.
it's just laughable.
No. See, we're doing. I think we're putting so much effort in to making these things clear, right? So neither Zulu nor I have ever suggested or even faintly implied that murder becomes impossible. As a matter of fact, I've never met an Ancap
Okay,
who
so-
didn't recognize that murder is still a very it's a part of the system that has to be accounted for. It never goes away. But what we're saying is the
Oh.
system does not prescribe it. Just like how in a social democracy, murder is sometimes not prescribed. It's sometimes against the law. Just like
state can-
how in a communist society there are rules, right? So there's the distinction between prescribed and is possible should be obvious, right? But we're the reason I'm talking over here to emphasize this is because you've made it necessary by taking what we said, where we said our system does not condone murder, and you've rephrased that as our system does not make murder possible. And because
Okay,
you've done that, I need you to acknowledge this. Because you've
Yes,
rephrased that so
sorry.
tremendously, we have to
Then-
take time now to talk about it and separate those differences out.
Maybe I just jump at the one thing that you said, but I remember you saying that my democracy could vote people in that would decide that they want to kill you,
Mhm.
right? Which is the same thing as that's like, yeah, that's possible in my system. Just like in your system, it's possible that it allows some type of murder.
No,
Because-
Zulu and I are not saying that. You're the one who's confusing possible and condoned. Okay, what Zulu is saying, and sorry, I'll back off again, Zulu. I couldn't resist it.
No worries.
What Zulu is saying here is that our system, in both systems, it's possible. So it's possible in yours, it's possible in ours. That is not a line of criticism that we are offering. The criticism is our rules never condone it. Your rules can condone it.
Your rules, but your rules say that the property owners can do a lot of things. Wouldn't they?
Yes, but not murder.
You disagree with what Galzar said, though?
No, because what's
No, you don't. So yes, indeed, sometimes it's possible for your system to condone
property?
murder. In fact,
Yes, what's
that is
property?
included within your system. So I'm confused about how your system isn't one where these voted-in sovereigns have vastly more power over me than I would have if I was a capitalist.
Well,
you know,
I said that there would be constitution, and in the constitution you can have
where does the
a
constitution
law.
come from?
Yeah, that's my point. Is
I've
that
got a real
exactly
quick question for you on the front of constitutions. Do you think that in the United States of America right now, it would be possible for any person to go out and purchase a bump stock for their rifle? Could they purchase a 40-round magazine in California Do you think they could do these things without the government getting on their ass? Saw off a shotgun to 3 inches barrel. Do you think they could do those things without
I
ATF
don't know.
getting...
Probably no. I don't know the laws.
Okay, are you aware of the Second Amendment to the Constitution
Yes.
of the United States,
So
where it says that the right to keep and bear
I
arms
agree.
shall not be
I agree.
infringed?
The Constitution
You know,
comes
they've
from the
put it in
government.
bold, underlined it twice, shall not be infringed. And yet, as it turns out, it is currently being infringed. So I don't buy that constitutions do literally a single thing in restricting the government.
My point is that somehow your system is special in this than mine, and I want to find out how when your system is based on property, as you said, right? And property needs to be defined and enforced. And who's going to do that? Well, the capitalist is going to do that.
Nope.
So in your society, the market's forces will be deciding, and the capitalist owners will decide what property actually is.
Nope,
So perhaps they could.
Nope.
Well, that's the realities. Maybe.
No.
Okay, so try.
No. We are not polycentrists.
Okay.
We are not David Friedmanites. We are not saying that what property is that comes from someone. We are not legal positivists. We are natural law theorists. We are saying what property is an objective fact. Whether some society recognizes that fact or not isn't relevant. It is an objective fact. Okay. Whereas you are a legal positivist. So the law and the interpretation of those laws must come from the government. So it is entirely expected within your system that things like the United States government is currently doing to the Second Amendment, that they would just do that to their own constitution as well.
Sure. But my view of the law right now, I'm talking is descriptive. I'm just saying that that's what would happen in your society. And you could say that those firms would suddenly had objectively wrong view of property, and then therefore they would no longer be anarcho-capitalist because they hire an assassin. Would that be the correct argument from your side?
Yes, it is indeed possible for there to be a society which is not anarcho-capitalist.
So this is why there is probably the misunderstanding between us, because this fundamental difference between you thinking that you know objective moral law and basing that on that and ignoring the structure that is going to build from the ideology of capitalism. So okay, I don't want to take any more of your time. It's late for me, so I'm going to have to go.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it. I think this one lasted, it must have been close to an hour and 20 minutes, I think. So it was a good one. We appreciate it a lot. You're heading out, and I think it's only fair that we give you the chance. If you want to keep it short, you're welcome to have the last word.
I just, one different question. Was my English fine with you guys?
I didn't have, I didn't find that I had a tremendous amount of difficulty with it.
That's great. Thanks. That's all I need.
No worries. Okay, no last word then?
Nope.
All right then. Have a good night.
Bye.
Alrighty. Well, geez, that's our last caller. So you got 2 calls in, but I feel that they were really good ones. Thanks everyone for tuning in. A couple of little housekeeping things right quick. If you're in the YouTube right now and you're not on our Discord, get in the Discord. It's the way that you call in. It's the primary way that we communicate with our audience. So it's a good idea to get in the Discord, and then feel free to invite your friends as well, your socialist friends, your libertarian friends. Minarchists in particular are lots of fun. So please take the opportunity to do that. Somebody was mentioning earlier that we should consider going into other platforms, and we're definitely already setting up the infrastructure to do that, but we're waiting for 500 subscribers. 500 subscribers is going to give us the opportunity to take in super chats, going to expand the whole functionality of what we can do here. And we're really excited about it. And we're actually heading there pretty quick. So 500 subscribers, you can expect to see us on all kinds of other platforms as well. There's a couple of different things that are also on the channel. If you take a look at the channel for the first time, there is a debate platform where I'm moderating debates rather than participating in them. There's a series called Talk It Through where I'm having casual chats with casual people, no professional debaters or anything like that, just sitting around talking about Ancap, seeing what kind of progress we can make. And you might be pleased to know I've been making some pretty good progress some of the time. So I think that's everything. Otherwise, Zulu, feel free to, I always say that, feel free to plug your your stuff and have the last word.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm of course Liquid Zulu. You can find me on the Liquid Zulu YouTube channel. I also have a course on libertarian ethics at liquidzulu.github.io. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so we can get super chats. And yeah, when we get super chats, they will definitely be given priority over normal ask questions. And we can even have, I believe StreamYard even lets you like bring them up on screen. It's all fancy and everything. And so yeah, make sure you do that. Thank everybody for coming along. And yeah, it was a good call.
All right. See you next time, guys. It's every week, Saturday at 5 p.m. Atlantic. And here comes the outro video.